Hello, excuse me. Hello, everybody. I'm Kelly Byrnes here with Bret Getzel. Good
Hi,
Lord, has to
Kelly.
pop right when I start, huh?
Yeah.
We are here today. This is our 34th book.
Oh my.
So, yeah, isn't that amazing? 3
That
years
is
we've been doing
incredible.
this. We've missed a month here or there, but today's book is Before I Was CEO, and we will dive into that in a few minutes. As you know, we are always here to do the leadership book of the month for the leaders who want to be leaders in the future, and so that they can prepare themselves now. So you invest in yourself today, you'll be a better leader tomorrow. So do you have any, you want to do an introduction and then give an update?
Sure. Be happy to. So Bret Getzel, thanks, Kelly, for hosting here. 33 years in industry this year. All of my experience is concentrated in sales, enterprise leadership, focusing largely in supply chain management, quite a bit of sourcing, protein-based, in the food service vertical primarily. So a lot of experience there, kind of came up through the ranks, if you will. A lot of connections and similarities to some of the CEOs that we're going to talk about today. There was a few of them that just, hey, that's my story. So that was kind of exciting to see how they went through the ranks and how they achieved what they did, because my story was so very similar. So rolling into the holidays here, I'll ask you in a minute here, Kelly, for your plans. My youngest daughter's coming in from Florida, so shout out to her. She finally completed her credentials for her CPA, working with Deloitte, which was actually one of the companies that was in our book. So very excited to have that. But she's checked all those boxes at the tender age of 23. So excited to see where her path takes us. Interestingly enough, the last 2 weeks I've kind of checked out and recharged, so to speak. Last week I went to Chicago and saw a great Neil Diamond show. So if you're a Neil Diamond fan, there's a traveling musical called A Beautiful Noise, and it's kind of making its way across the U.S. I think it had about a 10-month run on Broadway, and now it's got a 2-year touring schedule. So if that happens to be your thing, A Beautiful Noise.
That is my thing, and I'm going to write that down.
Oh, it is. Congratulations. I didn't realize that. Yeah. They end the show with a Sweet Caroline sing-along, so you can imagine an entire theater going through it. And the lead is a gentleman from Australia who happens to sound identical to Neil Diamond. So, yeah, if you're a Neil Diamond fan, it is definitely a must-see. The second part of my check-in here was I was able to get away to Mexico for a week, and my oldest daughter, Brooklyn, and I dive, and that's kind of our thing. We get away and do that. And so obviously there are 2 points to this here. The first being the need to check out and recharge. So I encourage everybody to make sure you do that. That's important. It's amazing how the days, the weeks, and the months can get away and we don't take care of ourselves. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which I found so remarkable, we had our day of diving. We dove Cozumel over in Mexico, and we did our thing, got all of our kit put together and rigged up, and we had about an hour or two to kill, and we went to just a beach chair, and we're sitting there watching the ocean, and my daughter Brooklyn pulls out a Kindle and starts to read, and I didn't even know that she was passionate about that. And I thought, the world has kind of come full circle, and here my daughter is reading. So I was so proud of her, because I know that wasn't her thing when she was younger. But there's that saying that we all eventually become our parents, and I could certainly see that in her. So that was wonderful. So over to you. Plans for the holidays and things on your bucket list?
Yeah, so we're doing well, and planning to go to Montana at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And so visit our daughter and her family, and so that'll be fun. And I think they have snow already, so we'll be hiking in our short hikes outside. But the fresh air is always good, and the change of scenery, all of those things. So that's exciting.
Yeah,
and
no place better than Montana ever.
Right. Wrapping up my client work for the year. That will wrap up at the first week of December, and then the semester. So teaching at Rockhurst, the semester ends the second week of December. So then I will have time to recharge and gear up for 2025. Can you believe that? 2025.
So did you research our author, or should I do that? I've got it put together.
Yeah, I've got him. Well, you can go ahead if you want to. But
Perfect. Yeah. So our author's Peter Vanham. He's a European. He's from Belgium, so I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But his bio, he's a business writer and media strategist. He's a U.S. he is the U.S. Media Lead, whatever that is, and a Global Leadership Fellow at the World Economic Forum. So if you ever see these things posted, a lot of them, McKinsey posts on Davos, and that's typically what they're talking about. He makes several references in his book to interacting with CEOs at that World Economic Forum, which is kind of a coming together of the great minds in business as well as in research and academia. He's a contributor to the Financial Times, the Business Insider, and Forbes. Prior to working in media, he was a management consultant at Bain, which, again, is a common thread that we'll hear throughout our conversation today. The thing I always think that's interesting is the connection from one book to the next. So for those of you who have been with us for several podcasts, recall that Indra Nooyi did time at Bain as well. So there are a lot of common points as you profile executives, leaderships, and CEOs. So he holds an MA in business economics from Columbia Journalism School and an MS in commercial engineering from the University of Leuven, which is in Europe. So I always like to look at the reviews and some of the quotes, and obviously authors have a way of going out to other authors to getting those, but I was looking for one that particularly was applicable here. And Lydia Groton, she's with the London Business School, said this she said, before I was CEO, life stories are always intriguing and fascinating. This is a marvelous book that provides glimpses and at times profound insights into the lives of a leader and deep reflections on what we can learn from their experiences and choices. So pretty well said, and I think that summarizes our book. I did look this up, and there are 20 CEOs that are profiled. Some are U.S. CEOs, some are European. All very, very large international conglomerate companies were profiled, but a really wide assortment and a very diverse group of both male and female CEOs were profiled in the book.
And not too many females, so I was looking for that, but there aren't very many at that top level in those companies. So at least there are a few, and he did refer to women and men executives too. So yep. Yeah, it didn't appear that he was leaving women out on purpose or anything. So what's one takeaway that you had from the book?
I actually went through every chapter. He summarized basically, I called them case studies or profiles, whatever term you want to use. He put a couple different CEOs together under different categories. And then at the end of each chapter, he had a lessons learned. So I took all of the lessons learned, kind of mashed them up and did my best to group them because there were some commonalities and some similar threads. I've got a couple here and we'll go through them as we visit. But one of the things that really, really jumped out at me was the continually investing in education and training. And that was a common theme, whether it was on the job training, whether it was mentoring. Virtually all of the CEOs had multiple undergraduate degrees. Many had MBAs, additional qualifications. They all professed to be lifelong learners. And as I'm reading a book, right, I'm looking for parallels from my own journey, either things that I've done that can be validated or things that I have yet to do, which I need to consider. And I think the thing that obviously we didn't talk about it at the beginning, but we can. Kelly and I came to know each other just simply because I did my MBA coursework at the very tender age of 50. And again, it was just that idea that kind of weaves with the thread. It's a common bind to many of the CEOs that we profiled in the book here about being a lifelong learner. And there aren't many 50-year-olds who would kick back and say, you know what, I want to go get my MBA. And I don't want to say it was grueling because it really wasn't. It was really more energizing. And the networking that I got both with the faculty as well as fellow students, and to be able to say, hey, I'm now part of that Rockhurst alumni base has really been powerful. And I completed mine in 2022, I believe, and I still get referrals from the university of young people that have questions about a certain career. I've kind of become the agricultural commodity specialist, and I just had
very good.
A young student who I guess had expressed an interest to the admissions office about an interest in commodities trading. And before I know it, I was connected with him. I think I've sent him 4 or 5 websites and multiple emails and connected with him with a couple of different employers. So the thread here obviously is just this commonality of all these successful CEOs and their investment in education, training, and lifelong learning.
Yeah, that was always stands out to me too. And then the references to either other books or other leaders we've studied. And I didn't write them down this time, but there were a few, in other topics that have come up in our conversations. But one of the things that stood out to me was because, as you mentioned, the CEOs, many of them are of global companies and are from Europe because the author's from Europe.
Right.
And how he started this book was he works for the World Economic Forum. And so he's at Davos, and he decided he was going to ask 3 questions of the leader of these CEOs when he would talk to them at Davos. And so he started asking these 3 questions. But when I started reading the book, and I thought, I'm not going to have anything in common with these people. You know,
Right.
they're global companies and from Europe. And I have moved for my job, but I haven't had the opportunity to hold a position in Europe or somewhere else, another country. And so I was kind of wondering, like, is this really going to be applicable? And then to our readers, and yes, it is. So I was very happy about that. And I had many takeaways beyond the ones at the end of the chapter. So some of the leaders would just have a one-off comment, but that was a golden nugget of great information. So there's lots of great lessons in here. The 3 questions that he asked the leaders were, have you always known what you wanted to be in life? What are some watershed moments that made you who you are? And when did you get on track to become a successful CEO? And so I think it was interesting that they didn't all aspire to be CEOs. So I work with a lot of people now who are a level or 2 down from there, and they would say that they didn't aspire to that either. And so just be open to that, to our viewers and to the readers of the book. Be open to that and be intentional about your choices that you make in your career. Great lessons on that at the end of the book. But that was all a good takeaway for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
The main one. Well, should we take turns sharing lessons learned, our favorite lessons?
I think that's great. I think that because that's really what the book's about, right? And we could go into the details of the individual stories, but I don't know that they're nearly as impactful as the lessons learned. So
in the time that we have, I don't think we'd have time to do justice to that.
Exactly.
So so we'll just take turns and share our favorite lessons, and then we'll wrap up.
So I kind of bundled a couple of them together, you know, that education one, there was 4 or 5 there, but another couple that I bundled, there was one comment about follow your gut instinct, not the money or fame. And then another one was, you know when to persevere and when to change course. And so as I reflected on those, because they're similar, right? I reflected back to a time I was with Farmland Foods, which is no longer a company. They've merged with another company. And I would read the financial statements every day. They were co-op, farmer-owned co-op. And each year the borrowing, the balance sheet, the borrowing would go up, and they would pay a patronage, or what was a co-op version of a dividend. And I was young at the time. I was in my late 20s, but I was at least financially savvy enough with the 4 financial documents. I go home and share with my wife. I said, this just doesn't work. I said, you know, this is similar to IBM going to the banks to borrow money just to give a dividend to their shareholders. I said, there's no company in their right mind that would do that. And they were a co-op at the time. And so farmer owned, and obviously there was an obligation to give back to the farmer owner. So anyway, long story short, my wife said to me, you know, do what you want to do, but I'm sure you'll make a good decision. I said, I can stay the course and, you know, see how it plays out. I said, if they go out of business, I'll be one of 1,500 people in Kansas City, you know, that have worked for this company. I said, I can certainly, you know, shop around and see what's out there. But, you know, this just doesn't look like it's going to end well. So anyway, long story short, I ultimately took a position with another company in Kansas City in May. And that was in 2001. And then I think October of 2021, they filed bankruptcy. And I felt, you know, here I am, this young, naive, really kind of wet behind the ears, 20-year-old, you know, young man. And I felt like I was able to foresee what was coming. And apparently, you know, a lot of people didn't. Now, everybody that stayed, in all fairness, through the bankruptcy all had jobs because the company was quickly sold to a competitor and lived on. But it was just an interesting time, and how it related to this idea of know when to persevere and when to change course, follow your gut instinct, not the money or fame. And that certainly fulfills kind of how that story played out for me.
Yeah. That's reminding me of the leader that was at Kearney, and now just Kearney. And he talked about the ups and downs of his career journey. But one of the things was when I think he was the CEO or one of the leaders there, but the company was sold, but then it wasn't going well. So a group of them got together to buy it back. Remember that story about him? But he talked about the agony of that. So even though it was something that they wanted, but they could have lost a lot of money if it didn't go through. And there were, you know, obviously a lot of challenge with that kind of a thing. And so just knowing, you recognizing when it is time to turn around or turn the ship, or
absolutely,
change your own career. Yeah, that was good.
What's another one that you have, Kelly?
One of my other one was from the CEO of Nestlé, and one of the first things he talked about was he was joking with the author. I think they went to the same undergrad, and not at the same time, but to the same school. And so they had a reference to something fun that happened there, and I didn't get the reference because I didn't go there. But they joked about how much fun that the CEO said, "Oh yeah, I did that 3 times when I was there." And the author said, "Oh, I wouldn't have thought a CEO would be doing that."
Sure.
And and is being social important? And he said,
I remember that exact thing. I do remember that.
Yeah. And he said, yes, that being social is a big part of any career, and not social like you have to be a lampshade on your head and life of the party, but being able to work a room and build relationships with people. And that made me feel good, because in college, I knew everybody in school, and it was quite social. Like in high school, I knew everyone and loved all the people, and more than the studies. So I felt reinforcement and some support from him making that comment. And then he did say later on in that section, he did say the most important job that he had was about people. So that's what the CEO's job was people, he said. So
you couldn't be more right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna play off of that one, because I think, and I've got several here, but I think that we'll just stay with that theme. So the lesson learned, the way the author noted it, was develop and maintain good personal connections with people that matter. And if you've been with us for 34 books, you've heard us mention many times the value of your network and surrounding yourself with people, and the opportunity or the desire, the need to build strong relationships. And one of the authors, or one of the CEOs, noted, don't build many relationships, but build strong ones. So my use case for myself, the application, you can imagine with the years that I've got in the industry, how many people I've hired and fired over the years, which it's been a lot. More than I could possibly remember. What's been interesting for me is the number of people that I've fired or that have left working with me that still stay connected with me. It just, you would think that terminating somebody would be, the death of the relationship, and quite the contrary. It's amazing how many people have stayed with me. So, case in point, I hired a gentleman about 10 years ago when I was at my former company, and then my position was eliminated, in all fairness, but he stayed on, and he eventually left and took another position with another company. Well, right about a year ago, a couple of months ago, actually, his position was eliminated, and he went through a very similar experience. And I was the second person he called after his wife, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I said, you know what? I know everybody in the industry that you would potentially want to work for. Let me make a couple calls. And between he and I've really advocated and networked on his behalf. He sent me a 30, 60, 90-day plan, sent me his resume, just literally leaned into the relationship, kind of reaching out for an olive branch or a landing pad, and what I'm sure was a very difficult time. And got a call last week, actually, again, right after his wife, that he landed one of the jobs that I was able to connect him with. And again, it's this idea of creating meaningful relationships and meaningful networks with people that matter. You can add to that if you like, and, say never be the smartest person in the room, which is there's a ton of value in that. I know we kind of use that saying and that cliche a little bit lighthearted, but for the people who have lived that and have that type of a mindset, the growth mindset versus the scarcity mindset, there's nothing more important than your network. And for those of you who maybe haven't experienced that, I can assure you that in those times of scarcity and those times of need, a solid network is really all you have to fall back on, and it can be just priceless.
And solid is key. I love the point about the fewer, so you can have real connections. So having 50,000 connections on Instagram or on LinkedIn, that's not going to help you if you don't really know the people.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you haven't done anything of service to them. Yeah. So that action item or that lesson, that was one of the key ones. And then that tied in with another one from Paul. I think it's pronounced Bouquet from Nestlé. He's a chairman now. He was CEO back when this came out, but he talked in his section. It wasn't one of the main points, but I underlined it. I didn't think I was going to have tabs on there, and I do. But he said, the first 10 years of his career, you invest heavily in yourself and in your development. And then it was after those 10 years that that he said he noticed things were changing quickly. And here's what he said. Because he delivered, he didn't complain, and he showed he could take on more challenging tasks. And then he referred to being low maintenance. And so I think that I talk a lot with clients that when I'm an executive coach, I talk a lot with them about having a track record, and GSD, get stuff done, and that's what he talked about, having that. That's what made him magnetic for other opportunities and attractive for other opportunities.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that network is key, and delivering, like at your example of your colleague, that he sent you a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And, that's showing he's ready to go. He has a track record. He knows what to do. He's actively doing something, not just talking about it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So I got another one here. This is, and I really, really adhere to this. The lesson learned was that adversity and battle scars are a rite of passage. And several of the CEOs talked about, one of them specifically, and I wrote this down as a quote. He says, "I'm wary of people that had a charm privileged life." And you would think it would just be the opposite, that you'd be attracted to people like that. And he said, "I'm wary of that." And back to the quote here, people that went to the right schools and only had successes or only talked about success, what that tells me is that they haven't taken enough risks. He said, "I would say most of the CEOs I know have strong convictions, and most of them have made mistakes. Until you've done that, you can't lead an organization," end quote. And as, again, what's the application here? I've been talking to several people about different opportunities, and the people that have most intrigued me are those that have experienced setbacks. I talked to a gentleman the other day, and literally he had spent 3 years going door to door selling boxed meat kits. And he said on any given day, he may bang on 120 doors. And if he can sell one presentation in a day, he said that would be a good day. And I related that. We'll get to it in a minute here, the CEO of Tupperware. But this gentleman, for 3 years, he had done that. And finally, he just said, "You know what? I've taken this as far as I can, and it's time to move on." And that ties back into another point, which, moving on or deciding to reset is not quitting, but back to this adversity here. And I talked to another gentleman, and he had spent 18 months in a call center. And if you've ever worked in a call center, if you've ever worked fast food, if you've ever worked in a kitchen, some of these opportunities, I almost feel it's a little bit like going to the military, Kelly, where we should almost require 2 years of indentured servitude for young people, because having worked in fast food, worked in the back of kitchens, worked in a call center, done door-to-door sales, there's so much learning and training. And
Right.
if we would look at it for what we're actually getting out of it, all of that training, all those people skills, all that problem solving, all that communication, the value of what we're getting far exceeds the financial benefits and rewards we're getting. So what's the takeaway? Many of the CEOs said the same thing. So for those of you who are potentially in that path right now, know that if you're in the grind, you're in the foxhole, you're really grinding it out, so to speak. You're learning probably a great more deal than what you realize. And for those folks on the hiring end of these situations, you might want to rethink or give some consideration to how you fairly evaluate candidates, because we have a tendency, I think, to lean towards the road-colored glasses, and the one who has always had the privileged life with all the credentials in the colleges and the Ivy Leagues that the CEOs talk about may or may not be the actual best candidate.
And that he did talk about that in the book, that all of them did not go to the fancy schools and many of them did not have traditional upper class backgrounds or childhoods and all of that. They had a lot of different experiences in their lives. So,
well, I think he makes the statement that only 1% actually, go to prep schools, go to an Ivy League school, start out consulting. And by 28, 29, they're on the fast track to the corner office. So obviously that's for the privileged few. If you've ever seen Hillbilly Elegy, which is it profiles J.D. Vance, the current vice president under the incoming President Trump, but kind of an interesting way to see what his life was like as a young person, then ultimately where it ended up. And now here he is, vice president going into the White House.
Huh. Interesting.
Hillbilly Elegy. It was on Netflix. It's entertaining, but I looked at it more as almost like a historical thing rather than actually an entertainment piece.
Okay.
But because it does profile, J.D. Vance's real life as a young person and a college student.
And then your other point too was reminded me too. Several of them talked about play the long game, which was one of our books.
Yep, I had that in here as well, right? I mean, they talked a little bit about balance and the fact that, a career can be 40 to 45 years. So, be prepared for that and obviously play the long game and know that the first 5 to even 10 years is all about learning and absorbing as much knowledge and information and skills as you can. Ask good questions, be a good observer, look for good mentors. But no, as you pointed out, it's a long journey. Now, as Kelly and I talked in our pregame, we're both in what we call the back nine of our careers. But, when we were 20, 25, it couldn't get here quick enough. Well, you blink your eyes, folks, and it's definitely here.
Exactly. So anybody watching, take your time, pay attention, slow down. One of them did talk about time. Also, or several of them talked about that. The Edelman, the son of the founder of Edelman, that he was Richard Edelman was our CEO in the book, but he talked about about one of his times of adversity early in his career. And so and they all had adversity, they all had ups and downs, but his was kind of funny. He said he had accessible self-confidence. So
I like to say that, every person, every company, every family has challenges. It's really how you handle those challenges, accept the better from the best. So
I like the wording that it sounded like he was kind of cocky at 20, 25 years old and, too big for his britches or whatever his saying was, but he said he had excessive self-confidence and needed to be humbled. And so we went through some ups and downs early on, and he got recentered, recalibrated, and then he always remembered that lesson.
So I've got to call out Rick Goings. I hope I'm saying that right. He's CEO of Tupperware. And again, this is the one that jumped out at me because it most emulated, my path. Troubled family life as a teenager. I mean, literally left home and was, what they call today couch surfing. Sold encyclopedias door to door. And very, very interesting, right? And I was thinking back as a kid. I mean, I did everything. I mowed grass. I delivered newspapers. I collected aluminum cans. I walked beans. I detasseled corn. I baled hay. I mean, if there was literally any hustle job that I could, generate $1 as a kid, I did it. I was just one of those kind of guys who was.
Well, I was one of those girls too. So I worked at a little store down the street and like stock shelves and for just at like $1 or $2. Answered the phone at the church rectory when the priests were at mass, and all kinds of things. Since I was 8 years old, I've had a job. Not supporting my family, but always had a job. Mm-hmm.
And then Mr. Goings, he enlisted in the Navy, which was kind of that transformational moment where, he obviously had some income and he had some management training. And then he was identified. I think he scored high on his scholastic tests is what the book said. And he was selected to be his platoon leader through the Navy. So he was always first for all the exercises, which is very similar again to my path. Went to basic training as a young man and, platoon leader and all of the almost word for word exactly like Rick had, and then he ultimately had a passion for sales. Now it was direct marketing, direct to consumer sales, and was identified very early as a very skilled entrepreneur and went through a couple different positions to include Avon, and then ultimately became CEO of Tupperware, which I didn't realize Tupperware today is a $2 billion company. As a young person, I could tell you in my house, we had all kinds of Tupperware. So I could certainly relate to the product, and even more so, I could relate to the CEO.
Yeah. And they just had a big sale about it at Costco. So it was,
did they?
Yeah. So it's been advertised again. So, and not just through the parties, but you can buy it at Costco.
That's great.
Another one was, what was the one that tied into that? The adversity, but then also I think that maybe is what helped them stay centered in their priorities. So they had work-life balance. They talked about that as a requirement. They were not working, as CEOs, they were not working 80 hours a week every week, and they did take time for their families, and they have work. They went to the gym every day and all of that.
That's interesting because that was exactly my next point. That's funny that you mentioned that we're aligned, and we didn't script this, believe it or not. So I had 2 points, right? And one of them was, that work-life balance, you can't have it all. And when I read that, what I immediately thought in Kelly's class, she has a product called an SCM, Strategic Course Management. I forget
career management.
There you
Strategic
go.
Career management framework.
Yeah, and there's a case study throughout the course that Kelly teaches where a young manager is newly promoted, relocates, and then his company identifies him as an overachiever, a top performer, and offers him an opportunity to relocate again very shortly after he had just settled, and he has to go to his family. And I think that the discussion point is, what do you do, right? That's you. And the point there, of course, is to have those difficult conversations with your spouse long before they happen. So when they do happen, that you're prepared for that. But to your point, having that discussion and having that support framework behind you. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And the actual lesson learned, the way it was worded in the book, says to build a successful career, you need to have a stable and happy personal situation and to have a happy personal life and a sense of professional purpose. And they all, I shouldn't say all, the majority of the CEOs talked about, there was a partner, because there was one that was a gay man, and then the wives had husbands, the husband had wives, and they all talked about their family and their support system. So how does that relate, right? My oldest daughter, Brooklyn, graduated from high school, and the graduation happened to fall on the weekend of the largest trade show in my industry, and it's virtually table stakes to be at that trade show. So the graduation, the walk, was on Saturday afternoon. The trade show went from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So I went to my employer at the time and I said, here's the deal. You're going to pay for 2 plane tickets. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, I'll fly in Friday. I'll have my meetings. I'll have meetings on Saturday. I'm going to take a plane home, which it was only Chicago to Kansas City. I said, I'm going to take a plane home. I'm going to go to graduation. When the graduation's over, I'll catch a flight back and I'll finish the trade show. And I did. And, everything was great. I had another experience that's very similar to this. And I've told this story 100 times. When my daughter was young, Brooklyn, she struggled with math, and it wasn't a strong suit of my wife. And so I taught my daughter how to scan her math homework into the computer and then email it to me. And wherever I was traveling from my work, I would take time out in the evening and dedicate an hour to doing her homework. Well, the funny part of the story is, depending on what time zone I was, it may have been at dinner time, where I was at a business engagement, and I traveled generally with the same people often and met some people. Well, it was the joke is that from 6 to 7 o'clock Central Time, I would often duck out. And sometimes I would be doing this math with my daughter in the seat of my rental car. Sometimes it was in the lobby of a hotel, but I would just be absent from dinner. And it got to be so routine. I would come back from doing math with my daughter. All the guys would say, were you doing math? I was doing math. But you know what? That was a priority to me, to make sure that she got what she needed from me for support, no matter what it took. And we often still laugh about that today, now that she's 25, doing math over the phone and her learning how to run a scanner at a computer at a very young age.
That's
so
amazing.
Yeah, don't ever prioritize one over the other, or you will regret it without question.
And the graduation example was literally one in the book that one of the CEOs had, that his daughter's graduation was at the very first meeting he was going to be leading as the chair or the CEO or something, the very first big one that he was going to lead, and he had to leave it early to fly home and go to the graduation. And so same situation. On LinkedIn, they ask questions. LinkedIn will send you a notification, and you're invited to answer this question, or we'd like you to answer this question. The question the other day that I received was something about that your work is infringing on your personal time, or something like that. Sure. And how do you handle that? Or a client is, or something. But I gave my answer to it and used the example of, every Saturday, my dad comes over for coffee. And so at 10 o'clock, and he's on time every Saturday, and I don't miss. My husband and I don't miss. So if there's a work thing comes up, or a social thing, I don't go until he's here for 1 hour. So I don't leave here until 11:05, like that. It's a done deal. It's a no-brainer. And I don't have to stop and evaluate these opportunities or the situations. It's just a done deal. So it's easy to say no, because that's my commitment. And so, similar to a lot of these CEOs in the book. And that there's a good article from Clayton Christensen, how will you measure your life? And I don't know if you remember that, but every class I teach, they have to read that article. So
I
that way,
have. I do
yeah,
remember that.
yeah, that's he talks in there about that example too. So tying into more of the work and things that we talk about. Well, why don't we share one more? We're almost finished with our time, but let's share one more. And I'm going to put up if you want more information about the leadership book of the month, go to the Voyage Consulting Group website, voyagecg.com/leadership books. I'll leave that up for a minute. So what's one more?
I got one more, and you've heard this story because you've heard me give my testimony more than once, but the lesson learned, the way it was framed in the book, was outperforming in the current role. And the follow-on that I wrote was, maximize what you're doing today while you're preparing for tomorrow, and then consider what you're doing today as nothing more than a launch pad for what lies ahead. And again, you've heard the story, but when I was a young man, I was the live hog yard receiving supervisor. So if you want to talk about a job that lacked glamour, that job could have been on Dirty Jobs, which what you'd know now. But my responsibility was to basically receive the animals into the stockyards, grade them and sort them, and then prepare them for processing. And the facility was owned by Tyson Foods, and this is a long time ago when Tyson was much smaller than they are today. But Don Tyson, who's now since passed on, loved to come to the plants and talk to the people. We always used to say he was a man of Main Street. He was more comfortable on Main Street than he was on Wall Street. And he came into the office there where we were doing our paperwork, and he was a relatively short man by stature, but obviously a big man by presence. And he looked me right in the eye. I still remember this as if it was just yesterday. And he said, "Young man, what do you do for our company?" And I said, "Sir, I'm the live hog receiving supervisor." And without hesitation, he looked back at me and he said, "I'll tell you what." He said, "We're a growing company." He said, "Do the job you have today to the best of your ability, and I guarantee you there will be opportunities." And it's one of those moments where I could have easily forgotten those words. I could have easily dismissed that engagement, but here I am. And it's got to be every bit of 30 years since that exchange. And I still remember that as if it were yesterday. And I've probably given that in my personal testimony no less than 50 times. And for whatever reason, like I said, it stuck with me. The lesson, I mean, granted, it's impressive, obviously engaging with Mr. Tyson, that in and of itself, but the lesson is probably the thing that's more valuable, and that do the job you have today to the best of your ability, and good things will happen. And I think we're naturally focused to always look beyond the horizon to what lies ahead, to what's out there tomorrow, and we step over the opportunity we have to bring value to those around us and in our network today. So the lesson for everybody again is, double down, do a good job on what you've got today, exceed expectations, and you will be noticed. I can assure you of that. And for whatever reason, if you're not, right, change your environment, change your circumstances, because
Right. That's so good. That really is a great story.
Thank you.
And that reminded me of the, let's see, which Gail McGovern with the, was she American Red Cross, I think?
Yeah, there's a lady that was the
governor. Yeah, she's chairman of the board now, but she talked about her career journey, similar to what you're talking about, and to be on the lookout. But they all kind of seem to say, don't have it set in stone, and don't expect your career to be set in stone. And so, but be going towards something. That's what all the learning is. But she said she would ask herself 3 questions before making a career decision. And it was, can I learn something new? Does it help me help others? And am I passionate about it? I think that's those 3 questions are fantastic list of criteria, and not overanalyze it, and not about the title. And that was one of the things at the very end of the book that the author talked about, or no, it's not at the end, but a litmus test to see if you're on the right track.
Yep.
And one of those was, can I be happy without the fancy title?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I always think of the books and kind of where they fit, who are they targeting, and who would they be valuable to? And most of the books that we read are concentrated on personal development and leadership, and then I reflected on all the different titles. And it's interesting if for those in the audience who maybe have done your MBA coursework or are considering it, MBA coursework today is largely about team projects. It's about reading, and it's about coursework, and then a lot of case studies. I could definitely see, Kelly, this book being not necessarily something where you would have tests or anything, but if you were to have suggested reading or recommended recommended reading in your personal development, I could certainly see where there would be a ton of value about this. So something to think about. I'm reading a couple other books right now that would have application in other MBA coursework, but I almost thought to myself, you know what? If you've read all the books that Kelly and I have recommended as you've come along with us, you've probably got a poor man's version of an MBA. You just don't have the diploma to hang on your wall.
Right. Well, and many will have MBAs, because I know some students that will watch these as well. So
yeah, exactly. So you always ask us, would you recommend this book, right? And I said, it's advice that I would give my 20-year-old self if there were such a thing. Maybe I'm mentoring a protege, or maybe I'm giving advice to a sibling or a family member or a child, something like that. But there is so much in here that's of value as you're preparing yourself to enter your professional journey. So again, would I recommend it? Yeah, I'd say it depends. It's certainly got value, and it's definitely one of those that is in that case study genre. So if you enjoy that type of a book rather than a book that's simply theoretical or entirely academic, I mean, this is one of those I think that's got some value. So my thoughts on it.
The stories are so good. Yeah.
So what's our book for next month, Kelly?
Our book for next month, I don't even have mine handy. It's in another room, but it is The Disconnect Principle by Ann Latham, and it will be December 19th. So we will.
Great.
Last one of the.
We're working around the holidays, everybody. So obviously Thanksgiving fell a week later this year. So we were able to stick with our theme, and then we'll have a week before Christmas. So this book that we're moving into in December it's not a heavy lift. We always try to end the year on a little bit of a lighthearted note. So had a great 24 with everybody that's come along on the journey, and we've already got our dates mapped out for 2025. Yeah. So if you're finding value in what we've done so far, look for more in 2025.
Yeah, and that book will help with the holidays, because it's about connections, and so it's chosen on purpose to be a good one to end the year, but it's not a hard read. So yeah, hopefully people will read. I have one final thing from this book. Something at the end. Next month's book also was recommended by Jim Vasilopoulos from last month. It was in his book, the book Clarity that we talked about in October. He referred to disconnect principle in there. That's why it's on our list. So. Mm-hmm. But he talks at the very, very end of this book. If you ever want to become CEO, your best bet might be to forget about that goal for now. Instead, remind yourself that you already know, for the most part, what makes you happy on a daily basis. And you should act on that knowledge from within, as it will be your best companion on the marathon that is your life and career.
Good advice.
So within, and I talk about the journey of life and leadership. So loved the tie-in with all of that. So thank you for the conversation, Brett.
Yeah, thank you. So our why, we always weave this in someplace in the podcast, because I think it really encapsulates why we do what we do and why we're here. So we developed this, I think, really early on in our journey, almost years ago now. But our why, is to inspire the leaders of tomorrow to invest in themselves today. And then I always like to put that Warren Buffett tagline on there, right? He said, investing in yourself is the one investment that's tax-free, and it'll give you rewards for a lifetime. So reading is that version. It's an opportunity for you to invest in yourself. And hopefully you come away from today inspired and continue to do just that.
Yeah, right on. Thank you so much. And when we talked the other day, you also mentioned reading as a way to recenter yourself. And
it certainly is.
All the turmoil going on at the end of the year end and quarter end, and just in society, that might be a good thing for people to take up more reading. Absolutely. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you're here live, I checked LinkedIn. I did not see questions, but thank you to those that were here live. And if you watch later, feel free to post questions to us, because we will look and see if you have anything. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. So thanks, everybody.